Previously on Minutia Minute.
Who are you? You can call me Beardy. I'm the you of Earth 2. There's a title you dropped. The very fabric of space-time is threatening to come apart unless you start getting this book again. There will be a reckoning. A crisis.
Hey everyone, Beardo here. You're watching Minutia Minute, and it's been a weird week. Beardy, as you saw, he popped into my video last week. A little bit frightening. I had no idea that there was more than one of me in the universe, or the multiverse, or whatever. Very, very creepy. I saw him this weekend. He was like walking around, pacing in the parking lot, and it really creeped me out. But that's all behind me now. I haven't seen him in a few days. He hasn't bugged me since I got comics. I actually am recording this video a little later than I normally do to make sure that he wasn't going to pop up, so hopefully we're free and clear of that Beardy guy, because that was a little scary. Not the only thing that was a little scary this week, however. This week I got my usual round of books. It ended up being 6 books, which for a week 5 is a lot, but for a normal week, that's pretty normal for me. And, despite having the normal number of books, the dent in my wallet this week was astronomical. Getting my 6 books, it cost, with tax, getting relatively close to $35, which is an unbelievable amount of money to be paying for comic books coming out week to week. The reason for that is we had some expensive books come out with annuals, and then sort of the $3.99 books that I cave for and get, even though I probably shouldn't. A lot of those came out today as well. So really, really expensive week this week, and to kind of commemorate the event and give a little piece to my pocketbook here, I've decided to order the books from most expensive to least expensive in the order that I review them this week, just to kind of give us some perspective on exactly how much we are really paying for the books that we're buying. Now, I didn't order these for most expensive cover price. I ordered these in the order of most expensive per page, so that way some of the bigger books have a fighting chance against the other ones, and we can kind of get a sense of exactly what comic book companies are making from us when they sell us a particular book for a certain price. Some of the findings may actually surprise you. I thought it was kind of interesting once everything broke down. So we'll see what you think. Kicking it off, not surprisingly, the most expensive books are the normal size books that cost $3.99. They're 22 pages and they're $3.99. Now, the first one I'm going to review for you guys is The Rocketeer, Cargo of Doom. This book weighed in at 18 cents a page. Actually, it was just a little bit more than that, but we're sort of rounding to the cent or to the half cent in a couple of cases. So yeah, 18 cents a page for Rocketeer, Cargo of Doom. Now, that was a price well worth paying. As you know, Mark Waid, Chris Samney, knocking out of the park week to week with this book. I absolutely love it. The thing that struck me about this particular read was things seem to be wrapping up very, very quickly. Like, we introduce sort of the Deus Ex Machina that's going to get the people of LA out of this situation. We introduce sort of a very lackluster resolution to sort of the main villain of the story, which I found really interesting because he does have this past with Cliff Secord, and there's a lot of tension there that's really basically not going to get explored at all in this story, which was a little disconcerting, but at the same time it seems like they're building it up to another mini-series, so that was kind of interesting, but at the same time I was a little meh on it this time around. And basically all the pawns are in place, everything is set for the big climax in issue number 4. Feels pretty rushed, but nevertheless, it was still a fun read. It's one of those, it's really hard to judge because we don't know. I actually looked online to see if there were solicitations for more Rocketeer books, and there aren't so far. But based on sort of the threads that they set up in this, that they seem to not be on the road to paying off in the next issue, I feel like there's another mini-series coming. So the question is, who's going to write it, who's going to illustrate it, and what's it going to be about? Really, really curious. If you're just looking for good old-fashioned comic book fun, you don't want to think about what's coming, you just want to read the issue at hand, this issue still did not disappoint, even though, as I said, some of the storylines kind of wrapped up a little too neatly just to set things up for the last issue. It was still a blast to read. We get to see lots of dinosaurs, lots of explosions, lots of Rocketeer heroics. Agent 42Q, when he reviewed sort of the original Rocketeer, he talked about how everyone was really self-centered and You know, the Rocketeer was in no way a superhero. It was kind of sexist, and all the kind of baggage that goes along with the original Rocketeer books, which he made some really relevant points. And then he sort of turned around and said that this book is much better because it kind of disregards that and kind of goes for a more traditional superhero book with a more traditional relationship between Rocketeer and Betty. I'm paraphrasing, so Matt, I apologize if I'm not saying this exactly the way you mean it, but I do kind of disagree with that. I feel like a lot of those elements are there. I just feel like they're more played in a little bit more of a politically correct, a little bit more fun way from Mark Waid in this book. So you still kind of have Betty playing Cliff Secord up sort of the jealousy angle that Cliff Secord feels. She's purposely implementing that against him, and she even says that in this issue, which is very Dave Stevens, sort of classic Rocketeer. But at the same time, there's a playfulness to it that I think comes out a little bit more clearly with Mark Waid and makes her a little bit more of a forgiving individual and a little less of a sort of this, sexist femme fatale kind of character that that Dave Stevens almost wrote her as, or could be interpreted as having written her as. And at the same time, you do get a lot more genuine heroics from the Rocketeer here. In the original Rocketeer series, he was sort of out for himself, and he if he saved anyone, it was pretty much by accident. In this, he does genuinely save the day, although at the same time there's still that element of like, he wasn't really planning on it, but once he realized that's what he was doing, he was kind of all for it. And it kind of brings a nice balance between the old Rocketeer and sort of this new Mark Waid Rocketeer. So all in all, I really loved this book. I mean, come on. If you're not buying this, you shouldn't be reading comics. All right, next up, another book that cost 18 cents a page. That is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 15. And I'm a little annoyed with Turtles this week, I'm not gonna lie, because IDW put out their Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book, which is $3.99, and they put out an annual, which I'm going to get to shortly, because I did pick it up. That book was $8.99. So all in all, I spent, $13 just on Turtles this week. My pocketbook just shriveled in my pants a little bit after saying that. So, moving past that conundrum, let's just look at the book. Because it's not about the price, it's about the quality, right? Now, this book was fun. I think the cover kind of says it all about what I don't like about Andy Kuhn's artwork, and that's those darn teeth. I can't stand it makes me nuts. That said, however, some of the sort of scratchy, like the first issue he did, it looked like he basically just did everything with a Sharpie, kind of like thumbnail drawings that they just published. It's starting to feel less like that. I still don't feel like he's the best illustrator of the Turtles, but he has kind of reached a happy medium, and it's okay. I will say it's a little disappointing having him art on art for this book, however, because we do get a big introduction of a certain other mutated character who I don't want to spoil. He may have come to light in the miniseries, which I haven't read all of the miniseries issues yet, or microseries, I should say. So maybe this isn't a spoiler if I were to tell you who's in this, but there is a pretty fun mutated character that pops up in this. It was really exciting, and it was simultaneously really exciting, at the same time I was a little disappointed because it's like, oh, Andy Kuhn's going to be the one who designs this and illustrates it. However, for Andy Kuhn's sort of, in my opinion, disabilities as an artist, it came through pretty well, and it ended up having a really great payoff and made me very excited for issue 16. My one issue with this is I feel like the first 12 issues, really, every issue kind of built on each other and, it built into this big story. With 13, 14, and 15, it feels like the book's kind of finding its next arc. Rather than sort of kicking it off and jumping right into the next arc, it's kind of feeling around for maybe we'll go this direction, maybe we'll go that direction. I don't believe for a second that the writer doesn't know where he's going to go, but I do feel like he's taking his time about it a little bit more than he did the last time around. So I'm really curious to get back to Shredder, Krang, all those guys. There are hints of them, but they're just sort of, just hints. You're just grasping at straws at this point. So we'll have to see what comes next. I do know next issue, though, is going to have an epic, kick-ass battle between the Turtles and another mutated individual that I won't spoil. Okay, moving on. We're getting into some slightly cheaper books. This book is 16 and a half cents per page, and it's a $3.99 book. However, you do get a couple more pages. So for that, you get 24 pages rather than the traditional 22 pages, and that is none other than Scam by Comics Tribe. Now, as Comics Tribe is an up-and-coming publisher, I'm all about paying a little bit of extra to them. It's disappointing that even though I'm willing to pay a little extra, $3.99 to get this book, it's still actually cheaper than like the IDWs and the Marvels that are all at 22 pages, which makes it 18 cents a page rather than 16 and a half cents a page. Nevertheless, though, let's talk about the actual issue. This issue's pretty gory compared to the first issue. I was a little bit surprised. I guess there was some kind of like graphicness here and there in the first issue, but this one, the moments are much more grisly and much more almost like Evil Dead in their over-the-topness. I do really enjoy the idea of having basically superpowered con men. Like, that concept I think is really, really fun. I don't know if I actually got to review issue 1 of this, because I didn't get issue 1 right away when it came out, so I'm not sure if I'm repeating myself or if this is new news for you on my perspective or whatever. But anyway, I do really like that concept. I will say that with this book coming out almost 2 months, I want to say, after the last book came out, I was a little bit lost at first, but Joe Mulvey does a really, really good job of kind of catching you up and reminding you of some of the plot points that have been set up. And this particular issue takes things in kind of a completely different direction than what you were expecting they were going to take at the end of issue 1. So he's definitely got me guessing. He's got a good, you know, sting operation, heist caper kind of thing going on, and clearly people are playing each other. There's double and triple crosses going on, and I'm really excited to see this all unfold, and I know that at the end of this is going to be a really good twist. I'm really curious to see what Comics Tribe is going to bring out after this book. There are a couple advertisements I've seen, and there is a preview to something coming up at the end of this issue, which for me was a little lackluster. So we'll just have to see. Hopefully Comics Tribe finds another hit and they're able to keep going on publishing books for years and years to come. So there you go. Joe Mulvey's Scam. Good pickup. Check it out. All right. Cheaper still was actually the most expensive book that I bought this week. It was actually Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Annual #1. This is a honker of a book. As you can see, I mean, it's like the full-on, like basically a mini trade, and this book weighed in at 60 solid pages. Now that's excluding, there's like a little page in the back and a page in the front, but it's like a title page and like an ad page, so technically 64 pages, but actual art-wise this is 60 pages even. That book put this book at 15 cents a page. Now, an interesting thing to note is I don't have any normal DC books, the $2.99 20-page books. However, those issues ring in at almost exactly 15 cents a page as well. So basically, even though this was the most expensive book that I bought this week, in terms of actual reading to do, it basically is the equivalent of buying, you know, 3 DC books, because those are 20 those are 20 pages for $2.99. This is 60 pages for $8.99. Do the math. Basically, it's like 2 cents more than buying a couple of DC books. So even though this is really expensive, it's actually relatively cheap. And it's interesting that, you know, I mean, we're about halfway through our stack today, and we're already, you know, basically DC seems to be the middle mark between the expensive books and the cheap books. So we like to think that DC's a little bit cheaper, but when you break it down per page, it's really pretty much right middle ground, you know, not too expensive, not too cheap. And that seems to be DC's thing, is let's not upset the status quo, let's just go with the flow and go right down the middle. So anyway, on to the actual book. Now, this is a very, very important moment in Turtles history for those of you guys out there who are big Turtle fans. This is written and illustrated by Kevin Eastman, which that hasn't happened since he was co-writing and illustrating with Peter Laird. And the last time they did that would have been Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles City at War, which was, I want to say, like issue 50, or right in that general frame area. Obviously, I may be missing, there may have been something in between there, but as far as Kevin Eastman doing a full-on issue, it's basically been probably close to 20 years. So this just the fact of that made this book a real treat to read and definitely worth the pickup. If you're into old Turtles nostalgia, it's worth the $8.99 to just pick this up and flip through it and see all the Kevin Eastman art. Now the question is, how does his personal storytelling, his personal illustration, hold up 20 years down the line? Because, like I said, he's been out of it for a long time, so is that going to translate to modern audiences? And the answer, in my opinion, is kind of yes and no. I have to go back and look at some of the older, like not the really old ones, but some of the, like the City at War era Kevin Eastman, Peter Laird, just to kind of see what it looks like. But the thing that struck me about this read was it's in black and white, classic Turtle style. And when you open it up and you start flipping through it, the pages are really, really dense. Kevin Eastman adds a lot of detail to this. There's a lot of sort of dot matrixy stuff going on that's really, really dense. It doesn't strike you as dot matrix, but it technically is, and it's kind of so dense on the page, and there's so many layers of that it's almost hard to read at times. Which, if you look back at the very early Turtles books, they're still kind of in the same style, but there's a little bit more choice on the part of Peter Laird and Kevin Eastman as to what they were going to actually illustrate, what they were just going to leave blank and let sort of your mind fill in the rest. And I think this book could have done with a little bit more reliance on my imagination. But at the same time, I definitely kind of see where he was coming from with that, because, this is his big return. He's doing 60 solid pages for us, and I think that he just wanted to bring the thunder, show what he could really do. And he did, but again, he may have actually gone a little bit too far. Now, where this book really shines, in my opinion, was the story. I really, really enjoyed this sort of one-off story. It technically fits into our current Turtle universe, but it's not really specific to it. It's mostly just kind of this nice little aside. What happens is Casey Jones and Raphael are basically, rowing in the streets, and Casey Jones drops his bat, and they go down to get it, and they get caught up in basically this like 5-way gang war. And there's this wonderful MacGuffin, which is this suitcase filled with diamonds that everybody is after. And it's very Hitchcockian in the sense that like two ordinary people, due to some complete random circumstantial happening, get caught up in this big event that, everyone's after the same thing. Very, very Hitchcockian in my opinion, which made this book a lot of fun to read. If you like your good Turtles banter, there's a lot of good stuff in here. It's not as funny as some of the other Turtles stuff that I've read recently, but there are some really good moments. When Kevin Eastman sort of introduces a character, he introduces them and gives a little blurb about them. Pretty much all of the blurbs made me laugh out loud, as well as just a couple good character moments within the story. Again, my only big complaint was that the art was a little bit more dense than it needed to be, and it made it a little bit difficult to read. But all in all, a really, really great book, and I definitely recommend you check this one out. Okay, getting on to the cheaper books. Now, DC earned basically the second cheapest rung of the week with their annuals. Their annuals are $4.99, but you get 38 pages, which works out to be about 13 cents a page. So these are a little bit better value for your money than the typical $2.99 DC books. And in my opinion, I got no problem with that. I wish that, like, this is gonna make a lot of you mad, but honestly, like, I would rather get a book that's twice the size for, just a little bit more, and then you get a lot more to ruminate and enjoy. Reading books this week, literally took me probably like 6 hours to get through my 6 books, because I was just reveling in it, and there was so much there to read through it. It made it really, really an enjoyable experience for me. So anyway, without further ado, the two DC books, the two DC annuals I picked up were Justice League Annual number 1, or Justice League Dark Annual number 1, and Swamp Thing Annual number 1. 13 cents a page, and I gotta say, we're gonna start with Swamp Thing because this book didn't do it for me. And even at 13 cents a page, I wish I hadn't picked it up. I leafed through this book and thought, okay, if this is just something extraneous, I'm not gonna get it. And especially because I knew my books were going to be expensive this week. It's like, if I can cut $5 out of my budget, that would be great. I opened the book up, turned to the first page, and it's like picked up right where the last issue had left off. And so I was like, okay, I'll pick it up. I wish I had leafed a little bit further, because that's just sort of the initial kickoff into this sort of whole backstory, which is the technical first meeting of Alec Holland and Abby, as well as his first introduction to Anton Arcane. And it's sort of this bizarre Transylvania story that all ends up with everyone losing their memory at the end of it. And this is basically Poison Ivy and all of the people of the Green reminding Alec Holland that this had happened. And it was just kind of like, this is pointless. This isn't giving us any real valuable information. I sincerely doubt that anything that happened in this is really going to pay off in the whole Rot World story. And the fact that this has Rot World on the top is really just to sell the annual. So for that reason, I felt a little bit duped. However, talking about the book in and of itself, it was actually a relatively enjoyable read. It's not at all in the style of sort of the Swamp Things that we've been getting thus far. Like I said, it feels a lot more like a sort of a 30s Dracula homage than an actual Swamp Thing book, which kind of made for a fun interlude, but again, not necessarily for $4.99. The thing that really shined more than anything, more than Scott Snyder's writing, which was co-written by Scott Tuft, and you could tell it wasn't the strongest writing, but it was really Becky Cloonan's art. It was fun seeing her kind of take on that Swamp Thing style, and you can still see, you know, Becky Cloonan's style underneath it, but at the same time, there's a good balance between her sort of modifying her style for the work and the work modifying itself for her style, and it made for a kind of fun balance, and it was really interesting to see how she was able to pull that off. And then to top it off, I don't know who did the coloring on this, but the person who did the coloring did a good job of fitting in, again, a good balance between the traditional Swamp Thing coloring, but a coloring that'll also still fit into Becky Cloonan's style. So all in all, this was almost worth a pickup just to kind of explore, you know, how a good artist can adapt their style and how, you know, what that kind of looks like. But if you're looking for the next big Rot World storyline, the next big moment in Rot World, this is not the place for it. So, give or take, this issue may or may not have been worth it for you. For $4.99, maybe not. But again, remember, it's only actually 13 cents a page, so it's not as expensive as you think. Alright, next up we've got Justice League Dark, also at 13 cents a page, and this book I went from hating to loving about halfway through the book, because you get the inclusion of, as you can see, Frankenstein Agent of Shade, and that sort of happens at the very beginning. It's this great, like, haha, Frankenstein's here, and I really enjoyed that. And then all of a sudden you get the addition of Amethyst, and I don't see, oh, I guess you do see Amethyst on the cover way back here, but she's not that noticeable, and I suddenly had this flash of like, oh god, is this going to be just like a Justice League Dark kind of rounding up all the different characters? Because then you get, all of a sudden you get Andrew Bennett back into it, and I was just a little bit like eye-rolly at that point. I was like, oh boy, I don't know about this. But then when you see how the story kind of plays out, you know, I mean, clearly it was like, you have this big hurrah where we get all of these characters together. And because they did it in the format of the annual, they were able to bring in all those characters and pay them all off and send them all away, all in one big, sweeping, big conclusion. And that is what actually made this issue work. If this had been like 3 issues of gathering more team members, that would have not worked. So about halfway through, I really warmed up to the fact that this sort of becomes a magic DC tour de force. And as the story kind of concludes, you're left with some really great hanging plot threads, and you're really excited for the next issue. All in all, I've really been enjoying Justice League Dark, and I gotta say, as creepy as Beardy of Earth 2 is for me, I gotta admit, I'm pretty glad he made me pick this up. And Oddfellows Thoughts, Ghost Critic, I don't want you to leave a comment below. No, 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 no. Don't say anything. Alright, anyway, so I've got one more book, and it gets Pick of the Week this week because it was the cheapest book I got. Not necessarily because it was the best, but it was actually very good. Now, what is the one company that's putting out books for a very good value for your money? And I think we all know it's Image, right? And especially their issue ones, they always give us a big, you know, a nice thick book, lots of reading, usually at the same price or just a little bit more than what their usual books cost. And that's what they did this week with Bedlam. This book was $3.50. It was 7.5 cents a page, which is practically half. It's almost exactly half of what a traditional DC $2.99 book is. So even though this is 50 cents more than your usual DC, you're getting so much more value for your money. And I wish I should have looked up to see just how much, like, once you include in inflation, just how much cheaper, how much it costs per page, like when you were buying Golden Age books, but I'll bet you it's not that much less than 7 cents a page. Because I want to say classic Golden Age books basically would cost about $1.50 now, and if they were, 25 pages, like this is about as close as you can get, at least, to Golden Age prices. Now, was this book worth picking up? This is by Nick Spencer, illustrated by Riley Rossmo, and covers. Fraser Irving is listed on the cover, but he's only doing actually the covers. I do really enjoy the cover of this, and you get a really, really scary story that fits what you're looking at right here. Basically, you've got this terrorist, and it reminded me very, very much of Joker Dark Knight style, where, he's going to kill a whole bunch of people unless something happens. The twist on this, though, is, with Joker, he's like, unless you kill this third individual, I'm going to blow up a hospital. In this, he's basically like, you have to get in and kill me. And if you don't do that in 20 minutes, then I'm going to blow up a hospital, or I think it was a school or something like that. And so it's kind of this interesting juxtaposition. You get this sort of, this guy clearly has a death wish. He's a very, very scary looking individual, and it makes for a really, really creepy story. Good Halloween read. If you picked this up yesterday and you read it, I think you would have been satisfied, if only because it was Halloween. Now, the tricky thing with this is Nick Spencer is up to his puzzle storytelling, as usual. So I don't really know where this book's headed, and I don't really quite understand what happened at the end. So it's going to take at least one more issue for me to really get my footing, and my guess is, considering it's Nick Spencer, it's probably going to take the entire series before I actually know what's going on. But if you're interested in sort of a Morning Glories horror book, this might be the book for you. It's Bedlam #1 by Image Comics, ringing it at only 7.5 cents per page. By far the most valuable comic book on the shelves this week. So there you go. I picked up this week Bedlam #1, 7.5 cents. Justice League Dark and Swamp Thing for 13 cents per page. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Annual #1 for 15 cents a page. Scam #2 for 16.5 cents a page. And, oh yeah, sorry, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 15 and Rocketeer Cargo of Doom #3 at a whopping 18 cents a page. Very expensive, but man, these books are good. I have to pick them up anyway. Okay, so hope you enjoyed today's reviews, and oh man, not you again. What do you mean again? Aren't you the Beardy from Earth 2? I gotta tell you, like, this whole Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 5, whatever it is, like, it creeps the crap out of me. Like, this is really scary stuff. That means that I'm too late. He's already gotten to you. What did he tell you? He told me that I should check out Justice League Dark. It's actually a pretty good idea. I think my subscribers are pretty happy about it. You don't understand. This is really, really bad. That guy, I mean, he's pure evil. Well, why would I think he's evil? I mean, think about it. He looks exactly like you, and yet he doesn't like Batman? Come on. I suppose that's true. But then who are you? Why should I trust you? Well, I'm the Sean, the Beardo, the whatever you want to call me, of Graphic Issue 616. That seems like a pretty weird name for just like a universe. Graphic Issue 616. What kind of a universe is that? Well, I'm sorry, it's not the name of my universe. It's the name of my YouTube channel. Your YouTube channel? Huh. I might have to check that out. You should check it out. Seriously though, whatever you do, be very, very careful, because he's very, very dangerous. He could get you at any minute. He's out to get you, but I'm here to protect you. I have to go now, because I have to prepare for the coming crisis. Whatever you do, don't let anyone into this apartment. We'll talk soon. To be continued.